It's another business day. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning right here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We'll start from the global space as usual to tell you what's going on with oil prices declines in early Asian trade hours on Wednesday, bouncing off two-month lows that it hit the previous session after an industry group reported that United States crude stockpiles fell last week. We see 27 cents added on Brent, that's 0.4% at $73.29. Really low compared to Nigeria's budget target for oil. But the WTI is also up 0.4%. Gone below $70 now, $69.18 a barrel. For this morning, U.S. crude stockpiles fell 650,000 barrels in the week ended February 21, according to official stockpiles data. And then economic reports by the United States and Germany pulled oil prices more than 2% lower on Tuesday. Brent crude closed at its lowest since December 23 on Tuesday, while WTI recorded its lowest settlement since December 10. U.S. data shows consumer confidence in February deteriorated at its sharpest pace in 3.5 years, with 12-month inflation expectations surging. Meanwhile, the German economy shrank in the last 3 months of 2024 compared to the prior quarter. Oil prices have also been buffeted by concerns that United States President Donald Trump's decisions about tariffs against China and other trading partners could add to pressure on the country's economy. Meanwhile, the United States and Ukraine have agreed on terms of drafts for minerals deals, and that's central to Trump's effort to rapidly end the war in Ukraine. An end to the war in Ukraine could pave the way for additional Russian oil supply into the market, and we know that that would reduce the price of oil globally. We're still staying in the oil space, but domestic now. The Petroleum Retailers Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria, Petron, they've instructed their members to refrain from shutting down operations. The association advocates for dialogue to resolve the outstanding bridging claims issue with the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA. The decision was taken following an emergency national executive meeting. While acknowledging the frustration and concerns of its members regarding the unpaid bridging claims that totals about 100 billion naira, Petron firmly believes that a shutdown would have devastating consequences, including fuel scarcity, which we already saw in some parts of Lagos, and there will also be economic disruption and hardship for Nigerians. Now, yesterday, we did get those numbers from the NBS. Nigeria's economy growing by 3.84% in the last quarter of 2024, and that's up from 3.46% in the third quarter of 2024 and the fourth quarter of 2024. This, of course, is according to the National Bureau of Statistics. This data follows the rebasing of the country's GDP by the National Bureau of Statistics. According to the NBS report, the services sector led the expansion, contributing 57.38% to the GDP. Oil sector grew 1.48 from 12.11 a year earlier, contributing 4.6% to the GDP. And the non-oil grew 3.96, driven by financial services, telecoms, agriculture, and manufacturing, contributing 95.40. That's a combination of that. Last week, the NBS reported that Nigeria's inflation rate had dropped from 34.8 to 24.48. I guess it's also important to add that this is not the rebased GDP. We're still awaiting that from the NBS. And of course, there's been reactions following those GDP numbers. This is from the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Oh, beg your pardon. The first we're taking is from the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, CPPE, and they said that Nigeria's 3.84% GDP growth in the fourth quarter of 2024 reflects both the gradual recovery of the nation's economy and the resilience of local entrepreneurs. The Chief Executive Officer of CPPE, Dr. Muda Yusuf, who made this assertion in response to the report, attributes the growth to the impact reports from the services sector, particularly hospitality subsector. He explains that despite the daunting macroeconomic and structural headwinds, the services sector continues to outperform the real sector of the economy, largely because of persistent structural impediment affecting real sector productivity. Meanwhile, the NBS is expected to release the country's GDP report, the rebase report, in the second week of March. And now we go to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where they've said that it proposed a 5% annual increment for 3 years as an alternative to the 15% port tariff increase that has been announced by the Nigerian Ports Authority. In a statement, the Chambers called for a balanced approach, noting that the tariff hike carries significant economic implications that must be addressed. The Chamber also says that Nigeria can learn valuable lessons from the countries with lower port charges, adding that improving efficiency by reducing process delays and optimizing port operations can lead to significant cost savings. The Chamber also adds that Nigeria can achieve its maritime trade goals by focusing on strategies to enhance port efficiency and competitiveness. And now we will take a short break. When we come back, as you would expect, we'll talk about the GDP numbers, the drivers, the sector's contributions, and what to expect in the first quarter of 2025, just after this break. Welcome back. Well, we're looking closely at those GDP numbers, and we'll be doing that with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Timeline Consulting, Mr. Shoaib Idris, joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Idris, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Inia, and thanks for having me.
So let's start from your views. The numbers, well, they're not the rebased ones, so I guess they are not shocking. Is it what you expected?
The numbers have been released by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, but I'd like to start my comment with a word of caution, particularly to the executives of the National Bureau of Statistics. Data usually speak volumes, and when you sweat a data, you get a number of information. We are witnessing an era where some of the data that are being released are a little bit, of concern to some of us. Some of the figures appear to be suspect, sometimes even contradictory between one arm of government or another. While it is gratifying to note that the gross domestic product of the country increased slightly, we are talking of 3.84% in the last quarter of last year. When you compare that with Q3, the same quarter, 2023, there is a marginal improvement. However, in the last 1 year, I'm sure Nigerians and indeed observers, whether within and outside Nigeria, of the Nigerian economy, will agree with me that quite a number of companies have closed shop. Some have literally gone under, they have gone bankrupt because they are not able to have sufficient working capital, either arising from the high cost of input. Inflation has been so high, exchange rate has been so excruciating, interest rate has been so high, so a number of businesses have closed shop. Now, the Bureau of Statistics brought these numbers, no comment on that particular, concern that each and every one of us have seen and witnessed, and there is a bit of a glozing over, this, preponderance of occurrences that we have witnessed, in the system. Yes, the services sector has improved, but even the agri sector, we all know that production from the agri subsector of the economy has largely been impacted by the insecurity that has remained a concern within, the 19 northern states and even some part of the southeastern state of the Federation. And yet we are still looking at, it is as if we are celebrating a 3.84% growth, when in essence we should be concerned about the areas where we are having challenges. I think the National Bureau of Statistics need to be careful before it loses its credibility and relevance when it is dishing out some of these figures. In the last, I think a couple of weeks back, the group managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation came out to celebrate that the nation was producing about 1.8 million barrels of crude oil per day. Now, the National Bureau of Statistics is bringing out figures to say the average daily production is 1.56 million barrels per day. That was even as per the previous quarter. The last quarter of 2024, the production was 1.54 million barrels per day, which means we went southward, we went down. So what exactly are we trying to portray? If care is not taken, analysts, businessmen and women may begin to cast doubt on some of these figures that are being released by the National Bureau of Statistics.
Sad thing, Mr. Shaibu, because having doubts about the numbers from the government, I wonder what people will work with. And this sentiment, unfortunately, is not new. We had this sentiment when the unemployment data was released, when the methodology was changed. We've had something close to this when the inflation number, the rebased inflation number, was released just a couple of weeks ago, even though when it comes to that, we've been told to just hold on and see the trend afterwards. So how do you think that this can be corrected if the NBS would release data and there'll be maybe notions of, unrealistic capture of these numbers? Then where do we go from here?
We do know that as economics, calculating real gross domestic product is a Herculean task. Even in developed economies where almost everything is recorded and registered and captured, as opposed to a country or an environment or ecosystem like ours, that largely greater proportion of our economic activities are not within the shadow of government or any record. But even then, when you are doing what we call guesstimate, guesswork plus estimation, we can do better than what is coming out. I believe it is essential that government should realize that economic data shouldn't be used as a propaganda tool just to have a feel-good syndrome kind of a situation. We need to state the fact on as it were basis, because if you are ill and you don't tell the doctor the extent of your illness, how do you get attention or remediation? How do you get medication to cure the ailment? We are being branded with data that are basically, to the best of my knowledge and belief, this data is suspect. This data, many cannot believe it. I'm sure if you check Economic Associates or financial derivatives data in quite a number of these, data that has been released by the MBS, you will see a sharp contrast. Like I told you, if the NNPC is given one set of data, and the NBS is giving another set of data. Meanwhile, they are all part of government. There's a challenge. If you go to the research department of the Central Bank of Nigeria, if you get some of this data, you will see that the data being released by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics becomes a little compromised and is now a tool for politicking and propaganda as opposed to tool for economic planning and business men and women decisions to either invest or divest or increase their activity within the nation.
I mean, I don't know if to go into the details of the data, seeing your sentiments around it, but I guess we should just see the major contributing sectors for this. We saw, of course, as you mentioned, services. Services had more than 57%. Then we saw trade. I mean, crop trade. Yeah, we saw agriculture there, 25.59. Industry contributed 17.03. Oil had 5.51% contribution to it. Agriculture is interesting to me because we see crop production is the highest contributor when it comes to agriculture. But we see that services is driving the growth of the GDP. How do we improve on this? Because there's still the issue of logistics. Here we see transport, contributing to that. How much more can we go when it comes to services? The UK economy, for instance, is built on services, but I don't think our services are that developed. How can we maximize these opportunities that we see that is beginning in the services sector?
When you identify an area of competitive advantage or comparative advantage, as Michael Porter puts it, the best you can do is to make sure that you take advantage, you maximize the opportunities that are before you. We have a country, the average age of our population is somewhere around 17–18%. We have population to our advantage, but are we getting the dividends of demographic, statistics that we have? The answer is no. Are we taking steps to seize this opportunity and make the economic activity to even be better? I don't think we are anywhere near. And as long as we continue to be in self-denial or delusion, we will continue to be where we are. This economy indeed can be the $3 trillion economy that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu wants us to get. But are we taking the necessary steps to achieve the objective of what Mr. President wants to achieve? I don't think so. Sometimes, they bring in data that I keep telling you that are suspect. I'm told the oil industry has grown because of certain logistics improvement, rail transportation, supply chain improvement. You ask yourself, is there any supply chain improvement? I was in Lagos yesterday. I came into Abuja this morning. As at yesterday, there were enormous amount of queues in most filling stations in Lagos. Now you're talking of supply chain improvement or this and that. So sometimes we just need to recline on a chair, be fair to ourselves, tell ourselves the bitter truth, and take the necessary steps to address the challenges that are facing us. And it is not campaign time. This is governance time. We should be able to take necessary decisions. Glory be to God. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took the decisive step to match the rates, therefore close the window of rent seeking, remove subsidy Glory be to God, yes, on all our petroleum products and other policies. However, don't also take other steps to bastardize these policies. I give you one example of recent, out of the blues, we are now giving selective, import waivers for certain companies to import food items. When a bag of fertilizer is going for about 70,000 naira, a farmer who bought fertilizer at 60 or 70,000 naira is not able to sell a bag of maize at a price good enough for him or her to recoup the investment in the farms. Meanwhile, that singular action is affecting our trade balance, is affecting our foreign reserves, is affecting the value of the naira, and is affecting even the employment level in the country. Now, the economic managers of this country need to tread on the path of caution. Otherwise, we are heading into a doldrum.
Well, we hope we do not head in there. Mr. Shuaib, thank you so much for sharing your passionate views with us this morning. Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Timeline Consult, Mr. Shuaib Idris.
Thank you.
All right, we're staying related to that. Taking it closer home now, the big GDP, we see the number 3.8. But what does this mean to businesses, to small businesses? We have right here in the studio to tell us the Chief Operating Officer of Streetcert Integrated Limited, Mr. Patrick Kawoju. Mr. Kawoju, good morning.
Good morning.
So yesterday we saw the GDP numbers from the NBS. Yeah. That would mean that the economy has grown when we compare the third quarter of 2024 to the fourth quarter by 3.84%. Yes. What does it mean to businesses? Is this just a number? Does it mean anything?
Unfortunately, most times it's just a number. And it's a number because we haven't started to feel it. It's not being felt on the streets yet, right? Too much of it, after it's been rebased, yes, we've seen that the economy has grown, but real inflation at the market.
What does economy has grown? What does it mean to a business? Does it mean more demand, more revenue?
Great question, right? What does it really mean? It ought to mean things you just mentioned. Increased demand, right? Increased disposable income for the populace, which translates to increased demand, which translates to increased revenue, which translates to increased profits, right? So it's supposed to trickle down such that eventually the small business owners, the staff, employees, everybody begins to have more money in their pocket. But in actual fact, this is not happening yet. Now, eventually, we expect to see it. These headline growths that are appearing in, that are being given to us, we expect to see.
They are being given to you.
Being given to us, right? We expect to see it trickle down.
Yeah, but the number is for the third quarter of 2024.
Yes.
That means this is supposed to have happened.
And so why I say
we are waiting for it to trickle down.
Yes,
yeah.
So but think about it, right? And probably I should also ask: have you actually felt the impact of that growth, right? To you as an individual, okay? A lot of, there's this thing that they say now that people's take home are not taking them home, right? And now, if in third quarter, it wasn't taking them home, and the fourth quarter, yes, there was some increase, especially driven by diaspora remittances. A lot of Nigerians from the diaspora came into the market, came back into the country to spend the Yuletide. So yes, all that happened, right? But apart from that, if you want to look at the real sector, okay, there was minimal impact from that growth. And so that's why I keep on speaking towards waiting for it to trickle down, okay? So it is going to, so I'm quite optimistic. I do believe that eventually we are going to begin to see...
what are the signs that make you optimistic?
So one, the dollar rate is going down, all right? Two, we are seeing less of a volatility. So it's not just the fact that it's going down, it's that it's not, you don't see too much volatility. with that.
There's a bit of stability.
Yes, there's a bit of stability. And so that's a good pointer, right? We are also seeing some moves by the government. They're pulling some levers that, especially around the tax reform, that we expect that when it does come on board, right, we're going to have lots of impacts, especially to the SME sectors. Okay, so those are some of the things you see and you're like, okay, there's hope.
We can be hopeful.
We can be hopeful.
Okay, yeah. but as we wait for that to materialize,
yes,
what should businesses be doing at this time to deal with, the disruptions or to hedge against it?
So I'm going to give a left field suggestion right now. Right? I'm going to go away from what most people would say to speak about the fact that you just mentioned lots of things are happening, right? For us in Nigeria, we have seen within the last, 24 months, we've seen subsidy removal, fuel subsidy removal. We've seen subsidy removal from the power sector to electricity. We've seen FX, right? No more FX controls like we used to have. Those are just some small subsets. And we expect to see more. There's talk about still removing the remaining subsidy on energy, electricity, right? The tax reform is going to come in very soon. So there are lots of changes happening. And we are not even speaking as to the external changes in the, outside our immediate environment. I mean, think of what's happening in Europe and in America.
Russia.
Yes. All impacting business. So there is change happening. Now, most times businesses respond to this external change by implementing internal changes too. So you could come here and say you need a new strategy, you need to be agile, become more adaptable, do a merger and acquisition, digital transformation, especially with the new technologies that are coming on board. Yeah, so all those things are approaches we could use. But the problem is, most of these change efforts are not yielding fruits. So there's the gap between the external change and the internal change, and this gap is widening. What organizations need to do is improve their capability to change. If you improve your capability to change, it means that whatever comes at you, you're more than likely to survive.
What does it mean to improve your capability? Because it can be theory. Is it orientation? Is it practical?
It is. It is practical. So there's this emerging science of change, right, that suggests that, okay, so let me start with this fact. 70% of all change efforts fail. And this is not peculiar to Nigeria. Cuts across geographies, across sectors, across all maturity levels, 70%. It's a fact. And they fail not because of the proficiency of the idea is lacking. It's not because the leaders are incompetent. It's also not because resources are unavailable. It's because they don't know how to midwife the people side of change. And we all forget when we speak to strategy, restructuring, or whatever it is, policy implementation. We forget that this thing that we call organizations, society, countries, it's made up of people. If you want to ensure that your implementations succeed, then what you're going to have to do is manage the people side of change. Right now, we are managing the technical side of change. We need to improve how we manage the people side of change. And this emerging science I speak to has provided playbooks, actual playbooks, tactics, strategies that help organizations and individuals, because it's also useful to us as individuals, to manage the changes we implement internally to ensure that they are swiftly and smartly executed.
Would this be an HR job?
No.
Sounds like a national orientation on a national scale, but when it comes to organizations, it sounds like an HR thing?
It's everybody. Because one other insight that's come up from this science is that you need a critical mass of change leaders across the organizations. It can't be a select few. So right now, when we approach change, we generally pick a select few, give it to them, give them the role to go.
They're supposed to be the change sellers.
Exactly.
Like
they're supposed
the
to be.
and all that.
Yes,
yeah?
they're supposed to. But you see, experience has taught us that it doesn't really work. That's one of the reasons why the rate of failure of change efforts is so appalling. So you need a critical mass. You need more than those select few, right? So it's not a HR thing. It's not
a national orientation thing. Is that what I hear you say?
It is a national, but it's not HR, but it's a national orientation thing. Yeah?
No, national orientation, I mean, you can see them as the HR of the country, and they're supposed to be driving to preparing the people, you know, but we seem, feeling their impact in Nigeria seems like a drop in the ocean.
Yes, again, because we are leaving it to the National Orientation Agency. National orientation shouldn't be the job of only the National Orientation Agency, right? It's everybody's job. It's you and I. And if we don't participate in it, if we don't take active participation in changing that orientation, it's not going to work.
Okay, I hear you, Mr. Odu. So while we wait for the change or the growth to trickle down, yes, we will try to work on our orientation to adapt to the change that we expect.
Increase our adaptability, yes.
That we expect to see. Thank you, Chief Operating Officer of Strasert Integrated Limited, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a break. When we come back, energy transition. We're talking of energy, and Mr. Shoaib did talk about those queues that we saw in parts of Lagos. Hopefully, we will not see them today, seeing that there's been dialogue going on about that wage bill, you know. So hopefully, we will not see that. But we are talking energy after the break. Just stay with us. Welcome back to watching Business Morning on Channels Television. We discuss energy transition now. Of course, we know it's not a new one in the country. We talked about the gas resources available in Nigeria. I wonder if you missed that October 1st special program. And we had the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Jet Motor Company, Mr. Derek Ewelukwa, and he was very passionate about the resources. I don't know what has happened between then and now, between October and now, if we had more adoption or adaptation to the alternative on green energy. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Derek, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ini. Thank you for having me once again on your show.
Great. So I know that during that conversation that we had on October 1, there was the issue of adaptation, acceptability of even this transition or to energy transition for Nigerians. What have you noticed between then and now as the situation improves? I would become more adaptive towards this clean energy.
Yes, thank you once again. The last time I was on your show, we were discussing energy security when it comes to the automobile industry. I mean, the auto industry, we assemble and manufacture automobiles. So energy is a very big process for us in order to get the equipments and in order to get the automobiles moving after they are built. We got hung up on the acceptability of the CNG as a means of powering the automotive sector. The last time, I believe it was in October of 2024, the last time I was on this show. And I've seen some change in that direction. The acceptance of that energy source is beginning to take shape. I think now what we're battling with is the issue of accessibility. As long as we get the affordability buttoned down, we get the acceptability, and we get the availability, now the accessibility is what we have to tackle. I say that because I see the demand has tremendously increased with respect to people trying to get their vehicles converted to run on CNG. And even you go to the CNG stations, you find lineups. So that tells me that people are beginning to key into this source of energy, or this alternative source of energy to power their vehicles. It is cleaner, it is cheaper, and it's affordable. So I think we now have to try to solve the accessibility issue there are lots of private sectors going into that space now. Government is also boosting that sector, and as I know, in the near future, the accessibility issue will also be solved. The last time I was here, it was the acceptability. Everybody was kind of gauging, would they really want to use this energy source to power their vehicle? But I think we've gone over that. People are beginning to find out that the CNG is okay. It's good to drive your vehicles on CNG. Now we have to solve the accessibility issue.
But now there's also the talk of capacity to meet up with the demand. And I mean, anybody who knows Nigerians know that once you cross the bridge of acceptability and the demand starts coming in, I mean, how many stations do we have for refill for these CNG vehicles? What infrastructure do we have in place, even though we've heard a lot of announcement from the government, you know, on infrastructure to maintain the CNG vehicles?
The infrastructure is directly proportional to the accessibility of these fuels, of this CNG. So that's the point I'm trying to get at. We have to make these infrastructure readily available so that these fuels could be accessible to the masses. I'm beginning to see new CNG refilling stations pop up across town. Across from my office or workshop down in Lagos, one sprang up in a matter of few months. And across town as well, these are beginning to spring up. Private entities are beginning to invest their own money into this infrastructure. And this is going to be complemented by the efforts of the current administration. And I know in no time, we won't be having this conversation about accessibility at every nook and cranny that you cover across the country. There is a petrol station, there's a diesel station. You know, I know it's going to be like that. Nigeria has an abundance of gas. You know, this government is visionary, if you ask me, to be able to have the idea to spur up this gas utilization. So I speak to friends. I know they are trying to invest their own money into this infrastructure. And with the efforts of the government, I know this infrastructure, the gap will be bridged in no time.
All right. And then in all of this, of course, we want to put more demand on the Naira to give it more value and patronize or create more employment. You know, so it has to be local. I mean, how much of these factors are domestic and how much of it, talking about electric vehicles and the whole use of transition and all of that, how much of it do we have to import and how much is locally produced?
Ini, I'm sorry if you was, I know you were speaking, but I couldn't catch what the question was.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, Derek, I was asking about how much local content do we have, even in our efforts in transitioning to clean energy, CNG, and the infrastructure around it?
Sorry, I got the last half of that question. I think we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, it does seem that way, unfortunately. Yeah. Unfortunately, it does seem Derek can barely hear me right there. I wanted to find out, since he's into is in the domestic electric vehicle area or industry in Nigeria, how much of it do they have to import, or how much of it really is made in Nigeria, or are we just the coupling is what's received when we talk about infrastructure to maintain or sustain the energy transition? I wonder if we could have Derek answer that final question. It would really be nice. Do we have Derek? Is Derek there? Okay, well, I guess the world is talking about electric vehicle at this time, and Nigeria joins it. But I mean, as I will always say, it's not just about joining what the world is doing, but how prepared are we? What do we have on ground to be able to accommodate this? I'll just call in Ladi now to give us global news. If we're able to get Derek to join us and answer that final question, that would be really nice. I know Ladi will be very understanding, but Ladi, so just stay on your toes. We're able to get Derek,
right.
you know, to answer that final question, that would be good. But
yeah,
I mean,
no problem at all.
Yeah,
and yeah, you did talk about, you know, electric vehicles
yes,
and hybrid vehicles. You know, I hear in Europe they're preferring the hybrid vehicles to the electric vehicles at this point. So there's a lot playing out, at this point.
Out.
And I would love the car makers to start making CNG cars from scratch.
In
so I don't
Nigeria.
have to convert. You know, at some point, just produce it. Produce a CNG car.
Ladi, I know you're dragging me to a long, long discussion, but right. I'm not going to fall for that.
All right. Let's see what's happening in the global space. At this point, we're seeing President Trump there has announced a $5 million gold card visa program. So this program, will allow foreigners to obtain a special, gold card visa for $5 million, which would grant them a green card privileges. This one, so it's a pathway to, U.S. citizenship. The program, which Trump described as legal, that could be launched within 2 weeks. So I'm guessing everybody watching out for that. Then we see the U.S. dollar, that's lifted from an 11-week low against major, currencies in the market. We know we're watching that currency market with the DXY. It's been boosted by a bounce in most of the, that's the short-term treasury yields in the market there. The Canadian dollar also rose too. We see the Canadian dollar, that rose earlier but slipped to a 2-week low. And the Mexican peso that weekend, we've been watching both currencies, the Mexican peso and the US dollar and how they've been playing out. Then we see Tesla's market value, that tumbled below the $1 trillion mark, pushing its market value below that level for the first time since November, after data showed the electric car makers' sales that slumped in Europe. And it's quite a coincidence. We see Bitcoin also fell to a low not seen since November. We know the relationship between Tesla and Bitcoin. Then we see Aston Martin. They've announced that it will reduce its global workforce by approximately 5%, cutting around 170 jobs. That's a big one there. As part of its strategy to cut costs and fuel future investments. We're seeing a lot of cost cutting, everywhere now, even with DOGE in the U.S., with the Department of Government Efficiency. Then German consumer sentiment is set to take a downturn in March, defying expectations for a modest rebound as households remaining cautious at this point amid growing economic and political uncertainty in Europe's largest economy. But let's take it on to Asia now. Let's see what's playing out in Asia. The Bank of Korea, they recently made a significant move to address economic challenges by cutting their interest rates by 25 basis points, bringing the benchmark rate to about 2.75%. Well, joining us now to break it down for us, we have Amanda Wolverton. She's a global marketing executive. Great to have you, Amanda. Good morning.
Good morning.
And
thank you for having me.
Thank you for staying up to catch the show today. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're seeing the Bank of Korea there. They've cited weakening consumer sentiment and concerns about the U.S. Tariff policies as key reasons for this rate cut. But how are you seeing it?
I think you just nailed you just hit the nail by the head. The South Korean economy right now facing headwinds from slowing growth engine, potential U.S. tariff threats, and also domestically political unrest in the country. So that's why these are the key 3 pillars that are driving the shifting monetary policy in the country. The Bank of Korea just cut rate to 2.75% under these pressure. And then it's because not only there's a potential risk in the trade, but also due to domestic confidence is wobbling. So in addition to that, South Korea is a global bellwether, both a technology company, both a technology powerhouse globally, as well as a export powerhouse. So that might have ripple effects globally in the supply chain.
And, with U.S. tariff policies expected to, hurt South Korea's exports, how might the rate cut, help in mitigating the negative effects on, because we know this economy is mostly export driven?
You're absolutely right. 40% of the South Korea's economy is for exporting. So to the government at the central bank, protecting the export capability and then the part of the sector is essential to the growth. So this is why that South Korea government has recently announced $254 billion rescue package or protection package, I would be more precise, for the export sector.
All right, and definitely it's all about inflation forecasts. In 2025, investors want to know, what the expectations are, and we're seeing, signs that inflation, globally, that might stay elevated with most of these tariff issues. But we see the Bank of Korea they're forecasting a steady 1.9% inflation forecast. So, given the rate cut and lower growth expectations, how do you see, the risk of inflation deviating, from the forecast we've seen so far?
You're absolutely right. The forecast for inflation actually has been tamed more than 1.9%. They recently revised the forecast to 1.5%. That is expected to be stable throughout 2025. And this is below the target of 2% from the government perspective. So that leaves some room for them to cut rates to stimulate the economy. So despite all the threat from potential tariff threat, including Trump was talking about that he might impose a tariff on cars and semiconductors, which are the two growth engine for South Korea's export economy. South Korea is still sitting in, for the central bank, at least from their perspective, a comfortable position, despite the political uncertainty in the company, that they still have room to manage in terms of monetary policy to both drive growth as well as keep inflation tamed.
All right, definitely investors just want to know what's going to play out with interest rates, going forward. We know how investors in the equities market, they don't like interest rate hikes. Definitely that hurts, their portfolios. But thank you so much for joining us, Amanda Wolverton, as the Global Marketing Executive. And thank you for staying up. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so there you have it. It's all about the tariff wars at this point, and everybody just wants to know when it's going to end. At this point with Trump, talking about tariff wars in Mexico and most of these countries. At the end of the day, investors are worried about what's going to play out with inflation. I'm also watching out for NVIDIA.
That's a big one for today.
For today. That would definitely spur investors.
Yeah, I'm sure Anita will have a good time with the numbers,
right.
Especially NASDAQ during intraday or features for the United States.
Yeah, we'll get more details at 1 p.m.
Yeah, thank you. See you there. Okay, so now let's see if we can have Derek back to tell us the domestic components in all of these, our energy transition and CNG. Derek, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes,
Great.
I can hear you.
Awesome. So I was just curious as to the local components in all of these talks of CNG, electric vehicles, and energy transition. How much local components do we have in there? All right, Derek, can you hear me?
You know.
All right. I think
Now,
all right.
if you're right.
Looks
You
like
are
we will
asking
have
about the local components
exactly
in respect to their energy transition.
exactly correct.
Well, in what we do, we try to incorporate as much as local components. I'm a big advocate of sustainable energy and sustainable development. In what we do, our flagship product is a full battery electric vehicle with about 68 kilowatt of lithium battery that can travel about 300 kilometers on a full charge. Now, the reason I went back to explain this is it's not only about the ability to do this. The inherent lithium in Nigeria will become a very key player in these sustainable transportation options. I want to go back and take a look at other countries that are doing it. Ethiopia, for example, has mastered electric vehicle transportation. Ethiopia has none of those minerals, if you ask me. But here in Nigeria, our local components will go a long way in shaping up this energy transition. One of the biggest problems we're going to have down the road is the infrastructure. Everything boils down to the infrastructure to drive this energy transition. So we're trying to churn out these electric vehicles, but the key questions that people keep asking is, how do we charge them? Where are we going to find the energy to charge them? How do we get from point A to point B running on electric vehicle? So we need to do a major investment in the infrastructure to get these vehicles moving by the time they hit the road. People are excited about the CNG vehicles and the kind of savings it can give them now. They are going to be super excited when the EVs hit the road. I know many people might think it's wishful thinking, but we have all the resources, we have all the capacity, we have the capabilities to achieve that here in Nigeria. We have the local talent, we have the local components, we have all we need. All we just have to put together is the policies and the will to get this done.
All right, I do hope, I believe we kind of have the policies, but the will, I guess, is something we should be looking for. But thank you so much, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Jet Motor Company, Mr. Derek Ewelukwa, for your time and your views this morning.
Thank you once again, Ini. Thank you for having me.
All right, glad we're able to get that final question in. But that's it on the program this morning. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Morning. At 1 p.m., Ladi and Anita will be back to give you intraday numbers and other business and economy stories at During Business Incorporated. I'm Ini John Mekwa, wishing you a beautiful day ahead.